Good afternoon, everyone, and thanks for joining us this afternoon. We are coming to you live from Tempe, Arizona, and we are here to talk about what life on campus is going to look like here at ASU this fall semester. My name is Katie Paquette. I'm the Vice President for Media Relations and Strategic Communications here at the university, and joining me is my colleague, Joanne Vogel, Vice President for Student Services. Joanne, you want to say hello and introduce yourself?
Hello, as Katie mentioned, I'm Joanne Vogel, Vice President of Student Services. Very excited to spend a little time with you this afternoon as we talk about the arrival of our students who will be joining us for the first time and those who are returning to campus.
All right. So I just want to give a little bit of background about today's webinar. We are aware that the impacts of COVID-19 are evolving each day, and we are providing a series of webinars every week in July to answer your questions and provide you with the latest information from the university about our fall plans. Today, we're only discussing topics related to campus life, as well as the health and safety measures that we are taking for the fall semester. The first 20 to 30 minutes of this webinar will be a discussion around answers to some of the most commonly asked questions that we're hearing from students and from families. We'll take live questions from Zoom webinar registrants only during the remaining 30 minutes of the webinar. We encourage you to ask your questions after the first 15 to 20 minutes of our discussion in case your question is covered on the front end. Type your questions into the Q&A function. We will not be answering questions via the chat function. Individuals watching the live stream on YouTube can send any unanswered questions to deanofstudents@asu.edu. And just as a note, this webinar will be recorded and will be available on our Fall 2020 website afterward, asu.edu/fall 2020. All right, let's go to the next slide. So we're going to start actually our webinar today just by talking about some new requirements that we announced yesterday for on-campus students related to COVID-19 testing. Joanne, do you want to give our audience an overview of what we just introduced yesterday?
Absolutely. So I realized that it probably caught some people off guard that we have come out at this point in time to minimize the risk to our campus community and help to ensure a healthier campus by requiring testing for all of the students who will be joining us in residence. I did see some questions already coming through the Q&A, so I'll try to make sure to answer them adequately as I talk through this slide with you. And so our ask is that if you haven't already been tested very recently, that you go and get a PCR test now. And so the reason we distinguished a PCR test, which can happen depending upon where you are and who's doing the sampling, is either saliva-based or a nasal swab. We don't want to confuse this with the antibody test. And so if you could ensure that you're getting that PCR or active viral test as soon as you receive the results, and we'll talk about how long that may be taking in some states and those who are eligible to test in other states, I'll get to that in just a second, is if you have those results or when you have those results, please upload them to the ASU Health Services patient portal. That 48-hour window, I think, has created a little bit of confusion. So I'm here to give you some clarity around that. We would like for that to be inputted into the patient portal at least 48 hours prior to your arrival. We understand that's a lot to ask. And so if there are some late entries, we do understand, but we're asking for that in order to remove the hold that will be on the student's account that tells us whether or not, if there's a hold on, they're not cleared to move in. If the hold is off, then they're cleared to move in. So that 48 hours allows us enough processing time to review the result and then to update our system so that we can ensure a smooth move in for your student. If for any reason, so I took a lot of calls and emails yesterday from families who are trying to figure out if they are not eligible in their state for testing because some areas are limiting to symptomatic individuals only. There is the option, and we can certainly share that with our registrants, to get a take-home kit. And that may save you some time, and it would also save some expense if you decide that you want to come in early and be tested by us here at ASU, which we'll talk about in a second. So if you're struggling to figure that out, we have teams of people that are troubleshooting and problem solving with you via phone or via email, so we can talk through an individual situation with you if needed, which we've been doing over the last 24 or 36 hours. If you are not living with us in residence, then we still encourage you to be tested. And so one of the questions that has been coming up is, well, why test now? By the time I get here, is it going to be accurate? And so in the same way we're asking this for our students who live nearby, we would want you to test where you're coming from so that you're not traveling if you're positive. We wouldn't want you to put people on a plane or people around you if you have to stop for gas, if you're driving, at any risk. And so if you were to receive a positive test, we imagine you might even be more comfortable if you're in self-isolation at home until you're cleared to join us. So there have been some questions about, well, what's the value? And one of the things I think that brings value is you wouldn't be traveling while infectious or while positive. So if once you're here, so back to if you want to be tested again. So some people are wondering, well, if I've tested there, but then I've traveled, what about testing once I get to Arizona or to ASU? We have the ability to test you, and those results are within 24 to 48 hours through our Biodesign Institute. And so we would encourage you, if you wish to do that once you arrive as well, or if you need to be tested here because you can't secure a test or you're not taking one of the take-home kits that's available commercially, then I would recommend that you go ahead and go into the ASU patient portal and sign up for a testing date and time so you could be tested as soon as you get here, or if you wish to be tested again after your arrival.
Great. And there is a webpage that we have set up. It's asu.edu fall 2020 COVID testing that will provide all of the information you need about where to get tested, how to sign up for appointments, things of that nature. I think a lot of our viewers are familiar with our fall 2020 page in general, and there's links to that testing page there as well. So that's very helpful. Joanne, can you just talk a little bit about what your recommended sort of testing protocol is for students, throughout the semester?
Yeah, so we would want any student who is symptomatic to be tested. You can make a telemedicine appointment, which is our preference. Please don't simply show up in our health clinic, because for patients who are there for other reasons, we're trying to minimize any exposure, although we have increased safeguards to assure against that if someone were to show up. But we would prefer that you call for a telemedicine appointment first, and then we'll arrange for how to secure testing for someone who is symptomatic. In addition, if you believe you've been exposed to someone who is positive, we would also encourage you to get tested. And then we do have some student groups that are being tested as requirements of sport. And so we do have a protocol for some of those students that are already in place. And if you, we have offered, if you simply want or need a test, that those will be made available to you. Although we would encourage, or we would say that you don't need to be tested too frequently, because remember that the virus has an incubation period and a time it would take to show up post exposure. And so if you have questions about that, I'll leave that to my MD friends to answer that. But that is certainly available if you wish to be tested as well.
And those recommendations are for any student who's living in university housing or off campus, right? I mean, we want all of our students who are, any student, regardless of where they're living, if they're symptomatic, to get a test and access, those services.
Most certainly, yes.
Okay, let's move to the next slide. We also introduced a couple of other new requirements yesterday. I think we've been talking about these requirements for some time, but they were a little bit more formally communicated in messages to students this week. So tell our webinar participants a little bit more about the community of care training and the kit that they'll receive, and then also the required daily symptom screening.
Sure. So your student, or students that are listening, all of our immersion students are required to participate in the community of care coming to campus training that's featured on this slide. It's going to give you a lot of information about the community expectations, including those about face coverings and the one that Katie just mentioned about the daily symptom self-screening. So please take that training. That will answer a lot of the questions that you likely have about the expectations for behavior on campus as relates to riding in elevators and social distancing or physical distancing. So please ensure you take that. I did bring for viewing pleasure is our community of care kit. So look for that. Students who live off campus, you can pick yours up in the bookstore and we'll arrange date and time for that. All you have to do is show your ID and you'll be given one of those community of care kits. Students and residents, we will get that to you for your use in residence. There are 2 fantastic face coverings in there that have a pitchfork and say forks up, masks up. We also have hand sanitizer, a pretty generous bottle with aloe vera that will help to just get you started. So please bring your own. See, now Katie had that out. So please bring adequate supplies with you. I acknowledge it is only a starter kit, but we just want to remind you of all the things: sanitizing wipes, hand sanitizer, the face coverings, and also a thermometer. So that leads me into the daily symptom checker, which is going to be available via the ASU app. So every day we're asking all members of our community, faculty, staff, and students who will be on campus to engage in the daily symptom self-check. One of the questions on there is, what is your temperature? And so just in case you weren't planning to come equipped with a thermometer, there is a thermometer, a digital one, in your community of care kit. And then once you input all of that, you will get clearance to be part of the community for the day, or it will advise you to call a medical professional depending upon the answers. And we do expect you to follow the advice so that we can continue to keep our community healthy.
And then just a follow-up question on that: if a student inputs their daily health check information and it advises them to stay home, call a medical provider, what does a student do if they have classes that day?
Yeah, they shouldn't go to class. And so this is the beauty of us being able to operate right now in ASU Sync, is you are able to participate in your classroom via Zoom. So our advice is, until you are cleared by a medical professional or you follow up on why you're exhibiting the symptoms that you have, that you should not be in class. So go ahead and participate if you're feeling up to it. We also have students who previously in the spring semester and summer who had tested positive, who continued to engage in class while in self-isolation and via ASU Sync.
Great. Okay. All right, next slide. All right, we have lots of students who are preparing to come to campus, and they are interested in knowing how move-in will work and whether or not family members are allowed to help them move in.
So move-in, which usually for us is roughly a 4 to 5 day experience, where people are very closely packed in and driving in and around in our elevators and stairwells and hallways, is we have expanded out the move-in process to extend out over 3 weeks. We made that choice intentionally very early on in order to minimize the amount of people that would be in the hallways and in the rooms and on campus, and to maximize the ability for people to have adequate physical distance. So you should have received, or if you have not gone in to sign up, this is your reminder to go in and make sure you have secured your move-in timeframe, which we would like for people to adhere to them. We're being a little bit rigid about that because we have spaced out people in a way that we feel comfortable adheres to health guidelines or does a better job of spacing people. So if you haven't signed up, please do. What will occur is our first wave, we do have some pre-arrivals, and many of them have already joined us. Our community assistants, those who will be in the communities to help you answer your questions and who provide programming and assistance. Many of them are already here, if not all of them. And then the next wave of students that we'll be welcoming in are our Maricopa County and other local Arizona residents who wish to come in during that week, or who we've asked to come in and drop off their items. And so their move-in, you will not require to have submitted your test results ahead of that, because you're only going to be in the building for a short period of time dropping off your belongings. In fact, those who are local or Maricopa County, you can get tested at that same time if it's convenient for you, because after you drop off your belongings, you'll head back home where you can await your test results. And then we'll invite you back into our community just before classes begin. Because that third wave of students we'll be bringing in are our out-of-state students, and we have spaced out their move-in times to be almost a week long.
Okay, Next
Oh,
slide.
that's about helpers. I'm sorry. Yes, about family members.
Oh,
I did
yes.
not answer that. So our current stance on that is you can bring up to 2 helpers or family members. I'm not going to get into the business of the people you choose. And so we do welcome them in. The only thing I would advise on that front is they are expected to adhere by all of our health guidelines, including the use of face coverings. So the only place that we have told students they can be without their face coverings in the res hall is in their own personal rooms. So we are asking you to, any of the family members or helpers you're bringing for move-in must abide by those same expectations.
Great. Okay, next slide. What health precautions are being made for on-campus housing?
Yes, so there's a lot going into that, some of which I just previewed. And so we're looking at, well, we are requiring face coverings in all of our common areas. We are also looking at the occupancy limits in some of the common areas. We've also spaced out furniture, used markings that in front of desks and the like, where we can remind you of how to appropriately physically distance. Also reminders about elevator usage and how many people should be on the elevator at any given time. We've engaged in an enhanced cleaning protocol. So some of you have heard me speak to this before, or you've seen it on our website, which is about our frequency of cleaning high touch surfaces. And then we'll also be limiting any of the outside occupants from being able to come into a residence hall. So once we're through move-in, when we have, at this point in time, we've agreed that you can have up to 2 helpers during move-in. Once move-in is over, the no guest policy is in effect. And so only the occupants of that building should be inside that residence hall, and no one from either non-ASU or from a different residence hall should be in that building. That way we can maintain a residential bubble, if you will, and try to minimize the amount of people who are in and out of the building.
Let's stay on this topic for a minute. What are kitchens and lounge spaces going to look like in residence halls?
Great question. So for the rooms that we have the ability where they might be on card control or there's a key, we will be limiting that to checkout only, and we'd want to know who's going to be using the room. Kitchens, we will have them available and open. We are also asking you to abide by, and there's some great guidance on the CDC. So if you're not familiar with shared and congregate housing guidelines or higher education guidelines on the CDC website like we are, it's a good read because those would be the guidelines that we are using in our planning. So maintaining adequate distance, not too many people in any particular location at any given time. And when it comes to kitchens, there's a lot of good guidance, which we are also asking students to adhere to about not sharing utensils.
And what are your recommendations for social gatherings in the residence halls? How do you advise students to still maintain social connections, but at an appropriate, distance, and keeping in mind all of the health parameters that we're dealing with?
Yeah, so some of the other colleges and universities that we've looked at, maybe limiting the amount of guests per room. We haven't come out at this point with any specific guideline related to that. Some places are 0 guests, some places are 1 at a time. What I would advise at this point, unless we come out with something more definitive, is please think about the size of your space and how many people could adequately physically distance. If at any point in time there is maybe too many people in a room, that might be a moment when community assistance will remind you of the expectation. And too many of those types of occurrences might lead to a referral to our Student Rights and Responsibilities Office through the Student Code of Conduct. So that's my quick advice to say, think about the size of your room, how many people based upon the furniture can actually distance, and don't go above that.
And face coverings are required in residence halls, except for when you're in your own room, either alone or with your roommate, correct?
Correct. And so you're making a great point there, Katie, which is if you are there by yourself or with your roommate, sure, feel free to make it feel like home. That's exactly what we want. If you have guests over from within the building, from down the hall, we would advise you and ask that you put on face coverings for the exact same reason that we're requiring it around campus. Also thinking about bathroom situations, unless you are brushing your teeth or washing your face under your face covering, it is also our health advice that you would keep that on in the bathroom.
Okay. Let's go to the next slide.
And showering, sorry, I'm not
Oh,
expecting.
yes. No face covering in the shower. Okay, we have lots of individuals who are curious about on-campus dining. Can you talk a little bit about what the dining options are, and are students going to be limited in their choices to just take out food?
Yeah, I've talked to a lot of people about the experience in the spring and how we were narrowing options as the amount of students on campus also happened to be decreasing. So I'm thrilled to be able to share that we have gone back to our more usual dining options. And so I know that will be met with lots of enthusiasm. I will tell you about a few of the things that have shifted. And so, in one of the planning that we've had to do about queuing or those who are standing in line and how to appropriately physically distance, there will be some restaurant dining locations or retail locations in particular, where we may have to take one of those offline one day and bring it back on the next day in order to have enough space for people. And so if I'll use a place I know gets very busy. If Qdoba or Burger King seem to be your thing, then just know that on some days of the week, in order for the retail location next door to be able to operate, we may have to alternate days of operation. So I do want to minimize a little bit of the expectation or moderate the expectation there. All dining will be takeout. And so that same concept that we applied in the spring will be at play. Dining, as you can imagine, when people are taking off their face coverings and engaging in eating, is a higher risk behavior, and we're attempting to minimize germ spread or the virus spread that way. And so once you get your takeout, head back to your room or head back to your car or head back to, if you have a cubicle or office space that is your own, then you could eat there. And so we will also have outdoor seating, and that will be available for eating as well. But I do want to mention that we are still operating with takeout only, but you will have an amazing range of choices of food. And so there's something that was talked about, pre-packaged utensils we've had in a lot of our materials. And I think people got the idea that this was like a pre-packaged box lunch situation. And I'm here to assure you that that is not the case. It is still pre-packaged utensils. We do want you to be careful if you're like refilling beverages. That is not something that we're allowing people to do. Someone will serve them in a refill environment. So be aware, you won't be able to buffet style anything. You will be served the food that you wish. And one other question that keeps coming up is about all you can eat options on the meal plan. So for students who are wondering about that, or family members, you'll be able to go back as many times as you wish within the hour to get another to go or take out tray of food or trays. That sounded a little lunchroom-like, but you know what I mean, is that you would be able to go back as many times as you want.
Okay, all right, that sounds good. Let's head on. Okay, if a student is planning on taking all of their classes via ASU Sync, what is the point of being on campus?
So you've got to want to be here. I mean, number one, this is a fantastic place to be. Maybe a little bit warm this time of year, but I can't for the life of me understand why a student wouldn't want to be here. Beyond that, though, I get the nature of the question, which is, are there other things to do? So I do want to share that we have a whole list. So if you haven't gone on our website and looked at the fall welcome, or that website indeed would be a great one to consult, is you can go ahead and get in there and look at what is occurring on Welcome Week. We're doing a combination. Some of those events, especially larger events, will be virtual. We have a virtual we have a virtual concert and a virtual speaker that may be of great interest, which I'm not yet at liberty to promote, but stay tuned for who those individuals might be. And then beyond that, we have a lot of smaller scale in-person options. So we'll be working with res hall floors. We'll be working with students who may be living off campus to sign up for different classroom tours or tour of the fitness center if you're not familiar with it, and some other activities that we will be facilitating in a smaller group gathering.
Okay. And It's public that the Pac-12 just announced a football schedule. We don't know what it's going to look like in terms of fan attendance, but there is a new schedule that was publicly announced. So we are working, as so many other institutions are, to really do what we can within the current circumstances to provide a robust in-person experience. And we're working through athletics and other activities. Again, all within the parameters of the health situation, but that's an exciting thing that I thought I would just mention.
And Katie, I glanced down at the Q&A and saw a question about the Sun Devil Fitness Center. And
oh yeah.
Since you're bringing up sort of what's in line with health guidance, is if those of you who are familiar with the state of Arizona know right now there is still a governor's order in effect that has gyms closed. So we are adhering to that as well. As soon as there is the ability, or we see gyms opening up in Arizona, then Sun Devil Fitness has actually already started training their student workers. They're fully prepared to welcome you back into the space. There are some things that are different as far as we've spaced equipment out so that it can be further apart as you are, or farther apart as you are exercising near someone. We've limited some of the attendance in group fitness to decrease the amount of people in any given room. And we've minimized some of the higher risk or closer connected types of activities. But we're going to be up and operating as much of the Sun Devil Fitness Center as we can, once we can.
I just want to add, these are all the reasons why we really need everybody within the ASU community to participate in all of the social distancing requirements and the face coverings, because we know that contributes to slowing, the spread of the virus. And the more that we can slow it and, see decreases in numbers, we know that, the more we'll be able to open up and provide more in-person experiences. So just super important that everybody, participate and follow those guidelines.
For sure.
Okay.
And if there's a question about face coverings in the SDFC, yes is the answer to that. And I would you mentioned the Pac-12 earlier. I'd mentioned that our athletes are also working out and training with face coverings on. So I know that people wonder if, should we, what is that like? They do make some great fitness face coverings, but we are requiring face coverings in the SDFC as well.
But Arizona is also beautiful, and there's tons of outdoor spaces to exercise in and great hiking and things of that nature that students can take advantage of. Okay, how will COVID-19 testing work for students? Will testing be free? And what should I do before I get my test results? We talked a little bit about this, but let's go over it again.
Sure. So we do have the ability to test you here on site, which we mentioned. So all you need to do is go in and sign up for a date and a time. Please let us know for any reason if you're having any difficulty figuring that out. You can get to it from ASU Health Services patient portal. It is free. And before you get the results of your test, we do strongly recommend people quarantine. If you're symptomatic, you should already be in a quarantine or self-isolation type of setting while you're awaiting your test results. I do know that the advice is a little different for those who are asymptomatic, but our healthcare professionals will guide you on that. We do recommend that people consider a quarantine while they're awaiting their results in the event they're positive and need to go into self-isolation or until they're clear about their status.
Okay, next question. What will happen if someone in my residence hall or class tests positive for COVID-19?
Yep, so similar to what we have done with any positive cases in our community before, we support the contact tracing efforts of the county or the state as relates to identifying high-risk exposures. So if you see in any of our materials something that says HREs, those are the high-risk exposures where somebody who has spent greater than 10 minutes with another person, less than 6 feet away, or has been identified as a high-risk exposure for any other reason than that, we will be notifying. ASU Health Services does that for students, is those who need to know, whether that's inside the classroom setting or if it's inside the residence hall. And then we will encourage those individuals to be tested for COVID.
Okay. Next question. Can you talk a little bit more about how the health of students will be monitored?
Yeah, so we've partnered with a third party that engages in healthcare screenings of a very sensitive nature. And so I know students have asked about the privacy of their information. We feel very good about how your information will be protected. You can access the self-screening, the symptom self-screening via the ASU app. That won't be available if you're in there, if you've already downloaded. Please go ahead and do so, but do know that this part, the self-screening part, will not be available till August 7th. And if you don't have your automatic updates turned on, then make sure you do, or you might not see the update with the symptom self-screening. But that's one of the ways we're asking you to be in charge of your own health. You're going to take your temperature, you're going to check if you have the symptoms. It is not something that we're asking you other than to comply with the daily expectation to do it and to follow through, but it is your health and you're going to be managing it.
And this is just one of the many precautions that we're taking around campus to, again, try to protect students and protect the entire ASU community. Okay, next slide. How will ASU support a student if they test positive for COVID-19?
Yeah, so once again, we have been managing COVID since the very end of January as part of our ASU community. And so we're getting, I think, really good at providing the level of support that our students would expect and their families would expect. What we will do is connect you not only with healthcare advice, we'll offer you counseling services if needed, because it can be a little isolating. We've noticed the psychological struggle with students that have to stay in self-isolation for extended periods of time. So we also assign students through our Dean of Students office a student advocacy and assistance engager. And that engager will offer, and so students who are listening in, you can tell me if it's too frequently or not, but we offer a daily contact with you to check in. How are you feeling? Do you need anything? Did your food delivery come on time? And so we also provide for our students and residents is a way for them to get their food so that they're not leaving self-isolation. That person is really the concierge, or is the person who is finding anything that you might need to enhance your feelings of support or to communicate with a faculty member. If you start feeling worse and you're not going to be participating in class via ASU Sync, the engager can help to notify your faculty members. So I think we really provide a comprehensive and all-inclusive type of support if somebody were to test positive for COVID-19.
Okay, next question. How does the university plan on enforcing the face coverings requirement?
Yeah, so we have a number of student workers. We have a number of community of care ambassadors, and every one of us in the community is going to be reminding people of the face covering requirement. It can be really easy until you're in the habit, if you haven't been, to walk out in the hallway or to be somewhere and to take your face covering off or to not have it with you. And so we're always coming at this from you may have forgotten, could I get you a face covering? And so in the classroom setting, our faculty have kits where they'll have disposable face coverings or disposable masks with them. We also have some student groups that will be walking around providing them if they see people without them. If we are in a situation, which I hope we won't be, that someone is refusing to wear a face covering, for instance, in the classroom, that person will be invited not to participate. And so they could be asked to leave, or will be asked to leave the classroom. And then they could certainly take their class via ASU Sync. So that's one way where they could continue to engage, but not necessarily be in the classroom. And if somebody has a repetitive or repeat not wearing face covering in the environment, we can use our student code of conduct, because it is a community expectation we have, where we could certainly up to and including removing the person from our on-campus community. We hope never to need to use that, because I know our Sun Devils and they're going to absolutely wear their face coverings. And if they haven't seen the Sparky video about face coverings, Katie, we need to make sure that everybody has a link to that.
Yes, it is live on our YouTube channel right now, so viewers can check it out there. It's also been posted on all of our social media accounts, Instagram, Twitter, Facebook. It has been going out over the last 24 hours, so it's a must watch. Okay, next question. What mental health and wellness services are available to students during the fall semester? There's a lot going on, and everybody's under, different stresses and pressures, and we recognize that. And so what resources do we have for students?
Yeah, I think I would just start. I feel like I would be remiss in not recognizing the amount of stress, as you're mentioning, fear for some, nervousness that comes on top of what already can be if you're newly transitioning into a college setting, or for family or parents if this is your first child to leave, or maybe it's the last, and maybe you're more excited than I give you credit for, I don't know. But I think we need to think about the time we're in, and it is very different. It can be isolating, it can be uncertain, I guess would be one of the words I would use too. And so we encourage people to reach out to each other, to someone who can assist. And so we have the full array of our mental health and wellness services. We have, if you want counseling, for instance, we have been able to and will continue to offer services via telecounseling for students that may be in self-isolation, for instance, or if students simply want to engage with counseling services in that way, it will be available. And so you can see all of that information online. I'd steer you to the wellness.asu.edu web link to see the variety of our services. We will have some of the other wellness services students are accustomed to. Our nutritional services will be available. We also have a Devils for Devils group, which is our peer group that is going to be releasing some videos and some information in the next week that will talk about student well-being from their voices, from student to student. So be on the lookout for that, but we have the full range, and we will figure out in the circumstance we're in how best to deliver that to students is for help and support.
Okay, next question. Oh, all right. Well, that covers it for our frequently asked questions, but I know we have a ton of questions from our viewers, and so I will start to ask those. Okay.
I see one, Katie. Could I go to one testing one that has come up a lot in the last 24 hours that I see, but I failed to answer?
Yes.
There's been an ask if out-of-state tests will count as the requirement. And so so yes, I think I can just get to absolutely. If you're being tested in your home state, the results from that test will be sufficient and do suffice.
Great.
Yep.
Okay. Question 1, do family members helping their students move in need to be tested?
So no, we're not requiring them to be tested. They will be inside our res halls for a very short period of time. We are asking that they wear the face covering at all times, but we are not requiring them to be tested. I do want, things are looking pretty good in Arizona right now, but in the event, and I hope this doesn't happen, but if things were to deteriorate or not to be as optimistic or as promising as they're looking currently in Arizona, we may make the difficult decision to limit the amount of helpers. But for now, no, we're not asking family members or helpers to be tested because they will only be there for a short period of time, and they're going to be abiding by our health guidelines.
Okay. We have a viewer who lives in Maricopa County, and they're moving their belongings in on August 5th, but they're not moving in fully until August 17th. If the viewer does not have their COVID test until the 5th, can they still move in their belongings?
Yep. So similar to that principle of very short period of time inside, if you are local and moving your belongings in, go ahead and do that. And you can get tested while you're here and await those results while you're back at home. So they do not have to have the negative result or the testing in prior to the drop off of belongings.
Okay. Question about the library. Will students be able to study in the library, and will they need an appointment?
So students will be able to study in the library. Some of the smaller group study rooms do require an appointment, and that's only to limit the amount of people that would be in that room at any given time. And also, if you can imagine, some of the appointment only helps us to track for contact tracing. So that's another reason too, is what group of students may have been in a particular room at a particular time. But the library is available. You will not have to sign up or reserve for some of those spots. And we're also setting up study areas across campus to make that easier if a student needed to via Zoom or via ASU Sync get into a classroom, that they'll have places around campus in the air conditioning to sit and be able to study or Zoom into their class.
Okay. You talked a little bit earlier about whether or not fitness centers are going to be open. They're closed right now because of Governor Ducey's executive order. But when they open, do you expect students will need to make appointments for the fitness center, or have we not figured that out quite yet?
We have. And so we are asking you, if you show up without an appointment and there's an open machine, you'll be able to make an appointment at that time. But yes, we do have, through the software that many of you, if you're already working out in our fitness centers, you'll be familiar with, you can go ahead and reserve your spot so that you know you can be on your on the machine you like, or they're also doing that for the weight room. So we can, in an hour type of time frame, or 15-minute to an hour time frame, is how many people can be in a particular weight room. So you will need to sign up, but you do have the ability to do that when you get to the fitness center for anything that continues to be open and available.
Okay. One of our viewers is asking about what we mean by a recent test. They're coming in from out of state and are wondering if they need their test in advance. I know, again, we've covered this, but let's just talk about it one more time.
Yep. So go ahead and submit. I think, the recency of that will matter, but we'll be back in touch with you if we think it isn't close enough to the dates that we would want you to be retested, and then we can help facilitate your retest here. Go ahead and submit whatever it is that you have, and our health services professionals will go ahead and let you know if they need you to retest.
Okay. And another question from one of our viewers, if I live off campus, do I need to get tested before classes begin?
You are not required to get tested if you live off campus, but we encourage you to get tested before classes begin.
Great. Okay. And again, students can have access to free testing through our Biodesign Institute. The turnaround time is 24 to 48 hours, so it's really speedy. And you can get information on testing at asu.edu/fall2020/COVID testing. What students are wondering when they can pick up their community of care kit. What day will they actually be available?
Yep. And so I would say be ready to get your kit upon check-in for students and residents. And I'll need to double check the date, Katie, unless you know it, for when it will be available in the bookstore. But my understanding was definitely before classes start. And I think mid-August is the target date on that.
Yes. One of our students or viewers is saying that you mentioned selecting a move-in date and time, and they're wondering where they can sign up for their move-in date and time. Is there a website we can direct them to?
Yep. So go into the housing portal. And so you should have received, if you've signed up for housing, numerous communications. So also look in your email. If you're not accustomed to checking your ASU email, now's a good time to check it.
Okay. Another question, how often will classrooms and other common spaces and buildings be cleaned and sanitized?
I'm sorry, say that one more time. Which buildings, residents?
How often will classrooms and other common spaces and buildings be cleaned and sanitized?
Yep. And so I think we posted that protocol, and it will be different depending upon use and depending upon which facility. So I would encourage people to go on and read about the protocol that way. The other thing that I think people are probably noticing in some of the research, and this should be a little bit comforting to all of us, is some of those surfaces don't seem to be having quite as much of the transmission issue which is why face coverings, as the respiratory droplets. Not to say you shouldn't be consumed or concerned about surfaces, you should. But I also don't know how many people are, like Katie and I, tracking all of what's coming out in research and how we need to adjust our practice on campus. But do know that we're in line with very good sanitation and cleansing practices there.
Okay, question about roommate agreements. Will roommate agreements include information and guidance on what to discuss related to COVID-19 for roommates?
Yes, that is included this year. That is an add we made.
Great. Are guests from outside your residence hall allowed to visit after move-in? What is the guest policy?
No. So only building-only occupants. So guests from others. So if somebody's living in Manzanita, they cannot go over and visit in Hacienda. So guests are limited to inside the residence hall. If you wish to meet someone from outside of your residence hall, I encourage you to head to the library or to the union or other spaces that we have on campus or outdoors, where you can be physically distanced and meet that person.
Okay. One of our viewers is asking, with so many students participating in online classes from their dorm rooms, is there enough bandwidth to ensure strong internet connectivity?
Yeah, so Katie and I have probably both heard from our head of our university technology office that the answer is yes. So, and if anything were to be unstable, someone just needs to let us know if that were to ever be the case, and we will get them right on the scene.
Yes, we've been obviously anticipating that this is something that we're going to need to prepare for. So we've been stress testing our internet connections and things of that nature. So we will be ready. Another question, are you allowed to eat in the common areas inside classroom buildings if you are social distancing?
Yeah, so we're still going with all dining needs to be happening outside or back in your personal rooms. And so we're working through some of that if we were to open up any spaces inside, whether in classrooms or common areas in classroom buildings, we'll let you know. But we're working through that now.
Okay, and a question from an international student. As an international student, can I get tested before coming to the US or do I need to get tested after arriving in the US?
You can absolutely get tested before and upload it like any of our other students. And so it does not have to occur here. The CDC guidelines, if you're coming via, and this is for all of our students, if you have traveled internationally or traveled on a cruise ship, the CDC continues to have as its guideline that you would go into a quarantine for 14 days. But the answer to the question that was asked is yes, go ahead and be tested in your home country and upload that. But also just remember about the quarantine requirements or quarantine guidelines, I should say, associated with travel.
Okay.
International travel.
One of our viewers is indicating that they live off campus and they want to know how they can access their community of care kit.
Yep, via the bookstore. So those will be available for pickup for our off-campus students in the bookstore.
Okay. For Maricopa County residents that are moving in their belongings, how much time do they get to move in?
Yeah, so we have everyone signed up in 2-hour windows. And so if for any reason, I hope you're not bringing that much stuff into your residence hall room, but if you were and you needed more time, please alert someone. We're hoping everyone can be in and out in that 2-hour time frame because we do need to, as we mentioned at the beginning of the webinar, is in order to space people out adequately, we need them to stay in their time frame.
Okay. Another question from a viewer, will ASU require more COVID tests throughout the semester?
Yeah, so we're working through that plan now. Back to what, Katie, when you asked what's our protocol, is it will be available for symptomatic, for those who are exposed and those who wish to be tested. We are working through if we will be asking subpopulations or people to be a sample of tests throughout different communities or in different places. But once we work through those details of how we would ask students to continue required testing, we will certainly let you know.
Okay. And then can students be tested on campus if they don't have symptoms? And can it be done more than once?
Yes, yes, and yes. So if you don't have symptoms, you can be tested. And if you'd like to do it more than once, you may.
Okay. Do student workers need to be tested in order to come back to work on campus?
Yeah, so for our student workers who are living with us, they will adhere to the live on requirement, the students and residents requirement. We do have our student workers who are community assistants because they live on undergoing testing. And then for students who live off campus that are student workers, we are not currently requiring them to test.
Okay. And then I think we have a parent question about a thermometer. The individual is saying, I assume we should purchase a thermometer if our student is required to measure their temp daily. Is that correct?
You don't have to purchase a thermometer because there's one in your community of care kit.
Right.
Yep.
Okay. And then will clubs and organizations still meet this fall?
Yes. So we watch something very exciting happen in the spring is our clubs and organizations continue to function, continue to have student elections, continue to have virtual gatherings, continue to connect in really meaningful ways. So whether those are smaller in-person gatherings in the fall, or they are continuing, many of them, to engage in a blended model, some in person, some virtual, or others that because of the size of their organization may not yet think they should assemble that many students all together. They are all planning to be active. I hear them planning. I've listened to their goals for the year. And so there's all sorts of ways to connect, whether it's in our Council of Coalitions, our student governments. It's all there for you.
Do students need to wear masks outside if they are alone and not within 6 feet of others?
Yeah, so this is the interesting part about some of our locations. And so I think about Tempe and downtown. Maybe there's a little bit more space at times at Poly at West where they might not be as dense. But I think we want to be prepared for the possibility that people, whether at a crosswalk or in the parking garage or in outdoor spaces, may very quickly be upon us who are not going to be as good as I'm sure all of you listening will be about maintaining 6 feet of distance. So our recommendation is that you continue to wear your face coverings in public. But technically speaking, if you're all alone and you're adequately distanced, our city and county guidelines don't necessarily require that, but you do need to stay current with all of the city and county mandates in addition to ours about face covering. So my recommendation is to have it on. Technically speaking, sure, if you're all alone and very distanced, that might be a moment outside. You don't have to have on your face cover.
Okay. Another parent question, due to COVID, we are sending our daughter to ASU alone from out of state. Will there be people there to help her move in and guide her?
I'm so glad someone asked. We still have people who are assisting with move-in. So it doesn't have to fall back only to family members, or in this case, family members who are probably making a good health choice not to necessarily travel to. So yes, we have people who will be assisting with move-in. We've hired movers. We extended, I'm sure they were thrilled, out their commitment to us for many more days so that they can be helpful. If for any reason you don't want our assistance to assist or move, we will allow you to move in your own belongings if that's your preference. But yes, there will definitely be help. There will be community assistance here. There will be people like me walking around campus who will be happy to answer the questions and provide all the support and assistance you need. But yes, there will be people helping with move-in.
Okay. If someone in a student's household tests positive, but they test negative, what should they do? Are they allowed on campus?
Yeah, so if they've been notified that they're a high risk exposure, they should be following the advice that they were given. Many times when you are notified you're a high risk exposure, you're asked to quarantine for 14 days. And so our expectation would be is the person, if they've been told to stay put and to engage in a certain behavior, would not be coming here. So I just want to put that out into the space. Once they are here, or if they've been clear, they've not been informed they were a high risk exposure, then certainly they should monitor their symptoms, which everyone will be doing daily, and reach out for consultation or support or testing if indicated.
Okay. If a student is living at home this fall due to COVID, can they get on-campus housing for the spring semester?
Yes. And so look in your inboxes on October 1st. There will be an invitation for those who wish to join us in the spring to sign up for spring housing. Of course, it's based upon availability, but we look forward to welcoming you in the spring because we want you to be here as soon as you feel comfortable and confident in being here.
Okay. How will cleaning for community bathrooms in the dorms work? How often will it take place?
Yeah, so if we're talking communal bathrooms where there are multiple people sharing, we do have multiple times a day people who are coming in to clean those bathrooms. If it is your suite style bathroom, those are the responsibility of the occupants to be cleaning. And so it is really important that you're managing your own cleaning regimen within your room, or if you're in a suite style or private bathroom, it will be on you to make sure you're cleaning that at the highest of levels and standards.
Okay. Will sports clubs and intramurals still take place? Where can students find more info?
That's great. So we're getting ready to release a statement about sports clubs and intramural play. I think you can imagine that if our NCAA sports are struggling with how this is going to look, our sports clubs and intramurals are doing the same. We hope that we can play and return to sport as soon as possible. There could be some delays and postponements along those lines. And there also may be some rearrangement. If I look at intramurals as a good example, any of the sports that would be high touch, close contact, we may delay for later if we can hope for an improvement in the health conditions or more improvement in the health conditions. But we can also do things like play cornhole as intramurals where there's a lot of distance and we may be able to engage in some of those activities. So we're looking for creative ways to still have intramurals and the like that adhere to health guidelines.
Okay. If a student gets their COVID test at ASU, do they still need to upload it to the portal or will that automatically happen?
That will automatically happen. So if you're already in the portal, you're being tested, you signed up for your appointment, that will feed into the system. We'll know if that comes back as positive or negative.
Okay. What does a student do if they don't have their test results before their move-in date?
Yeah, so we do have several families who are counting the days and students of when they've been promised the test results back. If you do not have a test when you get here, then we're going to ask you to go ahead and test again here because we know those results will come in within 24 to 48 hours. That may mean that if parents were maybe thinking they would have the hotel room to themselves for an extra night or two, that maybe your student will be with you during that time. As we might hope to, as you can imagine, keep them off campus until they receive a negative result. If that's not possible, we do have an inventory of quarantine rooms where we can assist students in being placed until they can move in.
Okay. Do families need a campus parking pass for move-in day, or is there a place for families to park while helping their student move in?
So when you get the instructions, which you should have, or if you haven't signed up for your time, that might be why you don't have the housing packet that explains in detail what to expect. You will pull into the line, we'll guide you and give you everything you need. We'll also, if you didn't engage in your testing, remind you that that is a requirement if we don't have your test result in. And then as far as parking, we'll guide you to most places. If we can find shaded parking, that's where we will guide you to, so that you can park your car and do all that you need to do after unloading and assist your student in unpacking. So that should all be revealed in that housing packet, but we do have a plan for that and where to park. Do not worry about what you need. We'll give you any kind of passes that you need when you check in.
Okay. Do students fill out the symptom checker every day or only on days when they're going to be on campus?
So we're asking people to do it daily. And that part of that is habit and part of that is watching your healthcare changes. And so I'm going to answer that with a quick, the expectation is daily. Although we are more concerned about the times that you would be coming onto campus for obvious reason, but you should be engaging in that practice state.
Okay. If a student is walking on campus with their roommate, do they still need to be 6 feet apart from him or her?
Well, it probably can't hurt. And so we would recommend that anytime you're interacting with someone else that you are 6 feet apart, your face coverings are on. But I absolutely understand if you're near your roommate and maybe it's a couple feet of distance because you all do that in the room as well. But we're hoping that you're trying to maintain distance inside your room as well.
Right. Well, that just about brings us to the end of our webinar. I know there were some questions about ASU Sync and how classes are going to work on ASU Sync and whether or not students can take classes, fully remotely this semester. We have several webinars about academics and ASU Sync, and those are all available on our Fall 2020 page, and we answer all of those questions there. Of course, if you still have questions about ASU Sync and your class schedule and things of that nature, you can email them to provost@asu.edu, and someone will get back to you with answers about ASU Sync. But for today, we hope that this was helpful and informative. We know there's a lot of changes. We know that everybody's excited, hopefully, and a little bit anxious about getting here, as we are. We can't wait to see all of you in a couple of weeks for the start of the fall semester. Again, if you still have questions that weren't answered today, you can direct them to the Dean of Students at asu.edu, and we will follow up with you. Just a reminder to download the ASU mobile app for the daily symptom checking. You won't be able to start doing that until August 7th, but we encourage you to download the app and just get familiar with it. There's a lot of great information and tools on there. As a final reminder, our COVID-19 testing website is right there on your screen. It's a little bit of a mouthful, but take a screenshot, write it down. Again, if you go to our Fall 2020 page, it'll be on there. Or if you have questions about that page, can't find it, email deanofstudents@asu.edu, and we will get you the information that you need. Thank you again for joining us today, and we look forward to seeing you here on campus. Have a great Friday and a great weekend, everyone.
Thank you.